Okay, there we go. Recording is on. Mishnah says like this. It's a very famous Mishnah and very important Mishnah. When you read it, second half of the Mishnah might be a little bit tough to handle. We'll get there. Huay Omer used to say, Ben Chamesh Shanim Lemikra. A 5-year-old should be studying the verses of the Torah. Mikra means Torah, means the scripture, and that a 5-year-old should be studying scripture. Ben Eser LeMishnah. Mishnah, which is the beginnings of the oral Torah, that should be taught to a 10-year-old. That's when that begins. Ben Shlosh Esrei LeMitzvos. A 13-year-old is obligated to keep mitzvos. Ben Chamesh Esrei LeTalmud. A 15-year-old to the study of Talmud. This educational policy is not adhered to anywhere. We'll talk about why. Ben Shmona Esrei L'chuppah, an 18-year-old for marriage. This is talking to men. Ben Esrim Lirdof, at 20 is the age of pursuit, which means that a person has the energy at age 20 to pursue a livelihood. We'll talk about why. Ben Shloshim Lekoach, a 30-year-old, has reached his peak of strength. Ben Arboim Lebina, a 40-year-old to understanding. Ben Chamishim La'etza, a 50-year-old to giving advice. Ben Shishim Lezikna, a 60-year-old for old age. Shkaech. Ben Shivim Leseva, a 70-year-old to seva, which is like a ripe old age. I think it's translated in many places as a hoary old age. Shkayach also, a lot to look forward to. Ben Shmonim Legvura, an 80-year-old to strength. What kind of nonsense is this? Ben Tishim Lashuach, a 90-year-old, has what he has to look forward to, a bent body. Thank you. Ben Meya Ki'ilu Meisva Aver Batamina Olam, and 100 as if he is dead and gone completely out of the world. What an encouraging Mishnah. Isn't it great, right? Up to the age of 50, you sound like you're doing well. When you hit 60, life is over. If I take the Mishnah for face value, life is over, and you don't have much to look forward to except getting bent and then burnt and then dying. Wonderful. Well, it's clearly, as we know, not what the Mishnah is teaching us. And this Mishnah is really teaching us that there is a pattern for Jewish life, and that a person has to recognize that pattern and know when they have certain kochos and capabilities, when they have certain powers to be able to accomplish things. And that when you're training someone, when you're training a child, you have to know that a child has certain abilities at certain times in their life, and that when you try to push them, you're not helping them. And by trying to skip stages, you're not helping a child. You think that you're giving them more, but in fact, what you're doing is you're giving them less, because there is development, and it's like that throughout our lives until the time we die. And it's important to know what God tells me that I'm capable of doing at 60 and at 70 and at 80 and at 90, to understand what my role is in this world and what I should be focusing on. And that I have things that I could be doing. I have things that I could be representing. I have things that I could be accomplishing. And I'm trying to live in another era. I'm trying to live in another stage in my life, and therefore not succeeding at the things that I'm doing and leaving go the things that I could be excelling at. And that's why it's critical to understand this. When you hit the ages of 20, 30, and 40, it's critical to know what you have the capability to do, so that you know what to develop. You know what you're able to do and what you're sort of expected to do, and therefore you know how to develop yourself. And that's the import of this Mishnah, is to lay out for us what each era in our lives, what each stage in our lives we're capable of doing and why. Let's start from the very beginning. So we used to say Ben Chamesh Shanim Lemikra. So a 5-year-old is should be studying Mikra. A 5-year-old should be studying scriptures. Now, scriptures is not just the laws of the Torah. Scriptures is the story of the Torah. Scriptures is all of the 5 books of Moses. Then after the 5 books of Moses is the books of the prophets and the books of the writings. When you look at, you say from 5 to 10, that's what a child should be doing. You're saying, no, what a child should be doing is playing with blocks and paint and expressing themselves, and they should just be free and to do whatever they want so that they learn how to experience the world. And stop it. Comes along the Mishnah and says, no. It's beautiful philosophy. It sounds wonderful, but that's not what they're capable of doing now. They have much greater capabilities. And now they're laying the foundations for the rest of their lives. What does that mean? So we know that we get this concept of a 5-year-old, that they are now capable to be able to learn, and to be able to learn scripture and to be able to start building foundations for their lives. How do we know that? We know that from trees. From trees. Because our rabbis tell us that much of what a human being has to learn is from a tree. Because remember, we learned last week, we talked about animals. And we said that there's something from everything in the world that parallels and is an example for a human being. We talked about the 4 different kinds of animals that we have to pattern ourselves after. We spoke about even trees, that you can look at a tree and you can learn what it is to reach up and to reach upwards, to strive upwards, to be able to set deep roots in the ground. And the deeper your roots are in the ground, so then the more successful the tree is going to be. We learned how to prune a tree. In other words, from every aspect of a tree, we have something to learn. But there's another aspect to the tree. We plant a fruit tree in the ground, and we know that fruit tree, the fruit from that tree, cannot be enjoyed really until the 5th year. Now, you're going to look at me a little funny and say, wait, I thought it was the 3rd year. And it's a mitzvah in the Torah called Orla, which means that the first 3 years of growth of a tree, we're not allowed to touch it. That is the reason why we give a child an upsharen, why we give a child, very often by male children, we have a custom of letting the hair grow long and then cutting the hair. The truth is that part of that is that is the beginning of their chinuch, of their education, of growing payas. Because we cut off the hair and we leave the payas. If you're not cutting off the hair and leaving the payas, it's really a little ridiculous. Be that as it may, we've adopted this custom, and it's wonderful. It's a great thing. It's a Jewish celebration, which is always good in a child's life and in a family's life. Nevertheless, we've taken out the real meaning of it and replaced it with some other kind of hoo-ha, which is all good. But the real concept of the upsharen, the real concept of the 3 years, is because God says, let the tree grow, and let it grow and just experience. In other words, don't train the tree. Don't try to make it into good fruit. Don't do anything to it. Just let it be. And that's the same with a child. But when it hits 3, when it hits 3 years old, what we do is we take that fruit in the 4th year, and we take the fruit in the 4th year and we bring it up to Jerusalem like second tithe, and we eat it in Jerusalem. You can't eat it wherever you are. You have to bring that fruit up to Jerusalem. And then in the 5th year, you can start to enjoy that fruit. Now the fruit is mature enough, the fruit is strong enough, is sweet enough, good enough to be nourishing, and we eat the fruit in the 5th year. Because the first 4 years are there just to let it grow, to let it set its roots. And that's the same with a child. What happens in the 5th year? So I want to tell you an amazing thing. Because the truth is, it's a little weird to learn about raising children and to learn about, pedagogical principles from trees. So let's take a little bit of a detour, and we'll come back to something very beautiful. We know, and we've spoken about this before, that when God created the world, he created everything in 6 days, and then on the 7th day was Shabbos. And the truth is that God didn't merely create everything in 6 days. Shabbos turned to God and said, every day of the week has a pair, but I don't have a pair. And God looked at Shabbos and said, you do. The Jewish people is your pair. That's your mate. Now, what does that medrash mean? So very often what we think is we say that every day has a pair. Sunday has Monday, Tuesday has Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, and then Shabbos sat alone. But what it is that we know that everything in this world was created male and female. And that there is the very essence of the world is that it is a coupling of a male force and a female force that creates the things in this world. Not only did God create all of the different, did God create all of the different species, male and female, but he created the energies in the world with male components and female components. There are four main components from which the world was created: air, fire, earth, dirt, and water. Fire was created on Sunday. Then when God looked at the world and he said, God looks at the world and he says that let there be light. Light was fire. The fourth day of creation was the parallel to fire. On the fourth day of creation, on the fourth day of creation was the taking of those orbs of that fire and putting it in the sky. The second day of creation, Monday, was the creation of water, was the putting of the water into the right places. And on the fifth day of creation was the water creating things teeming from the water, the fish, the birds, things that came from the water. The sixth day, the third day of creation was the creation of earth. And on the sixth day of creation was the creation of trees, of animals, of things that grew from the earth. Every day, Sunday, Wednesday, Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, every day had a parallel, had a male and female component. I'll tell you what's fascinating. Monday and Thursday are water days. Water in our tradition is a representative of Torah. What days of the week do we lane Torah on? Monday and Thursday. Because we could have, we know it was originally instituted so that we wouldn't go more than 3 days without studying Torah. There are other combinations that they could have made to make sure that we didn't go 3 days without studying Torah. Monday and Thursday, because that's the very essence of those days. They really ultimately are the roots of Torah because they are the roots of water. Water is metaphoric for Torah. When Shabbos complained to God and said it had nothing, no mate, it had no mate for air. Air is ruach, is spirit. And God said, the Jewish people are your mate. Because the Jewish people on Shabbos create all roots of ruchnius, all spirituality, all things spiritual come from that union, come from that mating of the Jewish people in Shabbos. This is how we understand that on every single day, there is on every single thing in this world, it is created, it exists here because of male and female energies. Let's take a look at day 6. Human being is created on day 6. God punishes the human being. And when we say he punishes the human being, God looks at the human being after he in the Garden of Eden, and it eats from the human being eats from the tree, and therefore he is punished, and the earth is punished also. Not only is man punished, but the earth is punished because God says, "Kotz v'dadar," that just thorns and thistles are going to grow for you, and that the earth is not going to be able to produce everything that it produced in the Garden of Eden. It's going to be a different earth now. So rabbis tell us that why is it that the earth was punished? The earth was punished because of something that happened on day 3. If you look carefully in the Torah at the Psukim, and I won't get so technical, but if you look carefully at the Torah says that when God commanded in every one of the days of creation, you will notice God commands, and then it happens. So God said, let there be light, and then it says in the Torah, and there was light. God said, let the trees grow from the earth, and then there were trees growing from the earth. So that was that it reflected in the Torah, it reflects both the command and the carrying out of the command. But if you look at the command for trees, what God said to trees was that what he wants them to do is to create fruit that tastes like the bark. That the bark of the tree itself, and the fruit of the tree should have the same taste. We only have, in fact, one tree. Well, there's two actually, but there's one main tree that has that quality, and that's called the esrog. And that's why the esrog is called the Pirkei. It's called the most beautiful of trees, because its bark and its fruit taste the same, which is symbolic of the notion that its inside and outside is consistent. That's one of the most difficult things for a human being, is to be able to be consistent in and out. You have feelings inside, but that your action should be in accordance with your feelings. That it doesn't always work that way, both to the positive and the negative side. Sometimes we feel stronger inside than we actually act outside, and sometimes we act greater than we're actually feeling. God wanted the trees to produce this way. The trees said no. And the trees didn't produce. They produced regular fruit. And therefore, when God punished the earth because of Adam's sin, he punished the earth also because of the fact that it didn't produce this kind of fruit. Now, I do realize that it's 8:20 at night, and it's over Zoom. You can't really feel my energy, so you accept it. It's good. Okay, Rabbi, fine.
Where do we learn that about the tree
It's a
growing?
It's a medrash.
Oh, it's just a medrash.
But if you look at the psukim, it's based on these verses in the Torah.
Uh-huh.
Now wait, but wait a second. What am I talking about? How is it possible that a tree could say no to God? A tree doesn't have free will. A tree doesn't have bechira. A tree is not a teenager. God turns to the tree and says to the tree, make this kind of fruit. And the tree says, no, I don't want to. What is that? What's the image? It doesn't make any sense.
Rabbi, the medrash can say anything.
Oh, sure it can, but it's got to make sense. On some level, it's got to make sense. You can't say that a tree says no. How does a tree say no? And then God punishes the earth. Bad earth, you said no to me. Don't ever say no to me. Like the whole thing, the image is off. So I'll tell you, beautiful, stunning explanation. The truth is that God wanted it this way because it couldn't be otherwise. So why did God want it this way? Because God wanted it to appear that the earth was saying no, so that we have something important to learn from. Because what we have to understand is that on day 3, God put into the world the desire to have independence. That he created a scenario in the Torah, this is not in the Medrash, this is in the Torah, where he turns to the earth and he demands of the earth to produce something, and the earth says no. The earth doesn't say no. God tells the earth, he programs the earth to say no. God makes it look that this is what the earth is saying, but the earth isn't saying no. The earth does not have the ability to say no. But when you look at that scenario, what you're looking at is the desire for independence. And then if God's saying to the earth, you can't exercise your independence on your own. It has to be within a certain context. You have to take that independence and you have to train that independence. That desire for being independent, you have to learn how to train that desire for being independent. Being independent is one of our greatest goals, of being able to do things on our own, not alone, but on our own, with our own strengths and our own abilities. We learned recently that it says that better a person should make his Shabbos into weekday rather than come on to other people. And what that means is that it's better that we forego some of the joys of Shabbos if we cannot afford them. It's better to let them go than to have to live off of the community, live off of other people, because we need to be independent. And God He showed us this desire to be independent became something that was a part of the earth itself. It wasn't just that God could give a mitzvah and tell us, be independent. He did. There are certain mitzvahs that teach us independence. But he had to show it to us like every other thing in the Torah. How do we learn how to be kind? We look at Abraham. How do we learn how to be strong? We look at Yitzchak. How do we learn how to be honest? We look at Yaakov. We have to have these examples in front of us. How do we learn how to deal with our desire for independence? It's in the very earth that we live in and that we were created from. Because on day 6, man was created. Man was created from that earth of day 3. And the earth of day 3 had planted in it this desire for independence, and man's got that also. Ki Adam eitz hasada, man is like a tree in the sense that those qualities that God put into the nutrients of the tree, into the very genes of the tree, in the genes of the earth, those are inside of us also. Our lives are completely tied up to the earth. Every single day we say this. Every single day we say, V'hoya im shamoa tishmu, if you listen to my words, God says the rain is going to come in its time. The fruit is going to be produced. What is it? Why that? Why not say, if you keep my commandments, you'll get $1 million. You have a nice house. You have a good car. Why does it have to say the earth is going to produce its produce? Everything, the weather is going to work fine. Everything is going to work the way it's supposed to work, because we are completely connected to the earth. We were created as the parallel to the earth. We were created from the earth. God gathered dirt from the 4 corners of the earth, and under the place of the temple, that's where, in the place where the temple in the future was going to sit in Jerusalem, that's where Adam was created. We are intrinsically connected to the earth. Look at our holidays. Every single one of our holidays in the Torah has 2 components. The one is the historical. Pesach, Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, remembrance of the exodus of Egypt. Shavuos, a remembrance of the giving of the Torah. The Sukkot, the ingathering of the Jewish people. But if you look, you will also find that every single one of those holidays has a nature component. It has an agricultural component. Pesach is the springtime. Things are beginning to grow, because that's a parallel of what the Jewish people were going through. The earth is living what the Jewish people were experiencing. Shavuos is the time of the harvest. The Jewish people were harvested, so to speak. We were fulfilling our task as the earth is fulfilling its task. The earth is a mirror of what's going on inside of the Jewish people. The Jewish people is a mirror of what's going on inside of the earth. Every single one of our holidays has an agricultural component. Here in Israel, very often, the agricultural component takes over, and that it becomes, Pesach becomes the Chag Aviv. It's the springtime festival. It's called that in the Torah, but it's not focused on, in the secular world, it's not focused on the fact that God took us out of Egypt. It's focused on springtime renewal, all of those things, which is fine, because that really is the message. But it's the message connected also to the Jewish people. It's an amazing thing that everything that we experience in the earth is experiencing exactly the same thing. Ki Adam eitz hasada, because God put this into the very earth that we live on. We are intrinsically connected to it. The ability to feel independent, to feel independent, and to choose ourselves, to be able to define ourselves, to be able to say, this is who I am, given the recipe from which I was made, given the different qualities that I was given, the different strengths that I was given. A little bit of this, a little bit of this. mix all of that together, and this is who I am. That ability to be dependent. So then that is our really one of our most critical tasks, to become independent, to become defined. When do we start that? We start to teach that to a child when they have the ability to have a sense of independence. And when is that? So our rabbis tell us that's 5. Just like a tree has its independence at 5, a tree begins to develop its fruit at 5 years. A child who is like a tree also has that ability at 5. Look at a child, 5-year-old child. And what do they, when you say to a child, can I help you get dressed? At 3, you say, put your hand in the shirt. And the child puts their hand in the shirt. And then, okay, lift your leg, put it in the pants. And they lift their leg and put it in the pants. And then at 5, all of a sudden, something happens. And you look at the child and says, let's get dressed. Okay, go out. I can do it myself. Because at 5 is when independence begins in a child. And that's at 5 where the basis of Torah values begin. We direct that striving for independence with in the proper strain and the proper direction by teaching the child Torah. Now, we don't teach the child a depth of Torah. We teach a child a broad-based understanding of Torah. When we tell them the story of Avram, we inspire them with what it is to be a kind person, what it is to focus on other people. When we talk about Yitzchak, we talk about what it is to have a backbone, to have strength. We talk about Yaakov, we talk about Yosef and his brothers, we talk about Moshe, we talk about the desert. Then, as they get older, we talk about Joshua, we talk about the prophets, we talk about the love of the land of Israel. Every single one of our Jewish values comes through in scriptures, comes through in Mikra. And we begin their lives as they are starting to feel independent and starting to get to know themselves. We begin their development with a diet of Jewish values, of Torah values, and Torah directions. I once gave this shiur, and a vision therapist said that research shows that a child isn't really ready to read until age 5. And at age 5, physiologically, they are capable of they're better equipped to be able to learn how to read at age 5. And that's why the Mishnah says, the Mishnah didn't invent this. The Mishnah got this. This was a tradition that came from God on Sinai, that at 5 years old, until 5, let a child develop. And at 5, now they are ready as they reach their independence. Now, did some children reach this at 4? Of course. But this is the average child. At 5 is now developing that sense of independence. Help them develop that sense by giving them independence within a context and teaching them the values into which they're going to become independent. Okay, next stage. And you notice that the next stage is how many years off the first stage?
5.
5 years.
Rabbi, can I have a quick question? How does this independence idea, what is the relation to free will? Is those, we talk about having free will, and is that
What does free will mean?
so, I mean, it's a little bit related where you're trying to, where you have the ability to choose to do the right thing.
Correct. So what we try to do, first of all, when we talk about this concept of bechira, which defines the human being, bechira, free choice, makes us different than everything else. Free choice does not mean, as 99% of Jews think, that you have the choice to do or not do. God gave you choice. You have free choice. That means if you want to keep the mitzvos, then good. And if you don't want to keep them, that's also good. That's not what free choice is. God didn't give us free choice. The Torah is not a book of suggestions. Ye old book of suggestions. That's not what Torah is. Torah is not like, if you have nothing else to do on a Wednesday, try one of these. There's no bechira in the Torah. What are every single object in the Torah? What's it called? It's called a mitzvah. What's a mitzvah? A tzivui, a command. A command. It's not a choice point. It's command. Now, bechira means that we are created with an ability to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing. We can choose between doing the right and the wrong thing. We're not robots. That's what bechira means. That an animal does not really have the ability to choose, certainly not in a sophisticated way. Because it doesn't have the ability to be able to discern. It doesn't have the ability to be able to think in the way that a human being has the ability to be able to think and to process. And that's our strong suit. That concept of bechira means that I have the ability to look and to figure out what's right and what's wrong. Every person has what's called a bechira point. There are certain things in your life that are absolutely wrong. You don't choose not to do them. You would never do them. For if stealing is something that is an anathema to you, then on no level are you going to steal. Anything that you would define as stealing, that's not where your moral dilemmas are. You're not choosing at that point because that's become completely part of you. So when you look, when let's say a person, even take kashrus, right? A person is 100% kosher, is nothing to talk about. Walks past the McDonald's. I'll make this personal. When I walk past the McDonald's, although I do enjoy the smell, which might be its own halachic problem, but I do enjoy the smell, and I recognize that it's not healthy. All my doctors are sitting there going, no, don't say you enjoy the smell. Okay, fine. But at the end of the day, the smell's geschmack. But I don't sit there as I walk past a McDonald's and say to myself, I think I'm going to go inside today. No, don't do the wrong thing. Don't have the strength to stay away from McDonald's. I'm not going through a dilemma. Shabbos morning, I don't wake up and say, I just have this hankering to watch TV. I'm going to flip my computer on. It's not. It doesn't exist for me. And by the way, I'm not saying this in a haughty kind of way. I'm just using this as an example. Why doesn't it exist for me? Because that's not where my bechira lies. That's not where my free choice lies. Because that it's moved over to the other side. It's above that line. It's something that is basic to me. Something that's basic to me. There is no bechira being used. Bechira, this choice thing, comes into things that are not clear. Lashon hara. Whether I'm going to say something about somebody or not, that's where my battle exists. Whether I'm going to have kavanah, I'm going to have intention when I make a bracha, that's where my battle exists. What we want to do to a child, this is, by the way, basic raising of children. What we want to do to a child is make as many things basic to their lives so that their dilemma doesn't exist there. That's why we want to teach a child at the age of 5 honesty. We want to teach them integrity. We want to teach them kindness. We want to teach them all of these things so that their battle won't exist there, because that becomes part of them. But the things that are not part of them, that's where their battle is. By the way, this is important for adults also. If a person wants to grow in Torah and Judaism, so we have to make things, and you think of it in your own lives, anything you've grown in has become a part of your life. You no longer have a dilemma with it. The way to make that happen is by focusing on it. When you focus on things, meaning you don't take 20 things and try to make those things, basic part of your life. You take one thing and you try to incorporate it into your daily existence. Let's say tefillin. Person decides, they want to put on tefillin. So they start putting on tefillin, and then the first challenge comes, right? They have a morning meeting. They won't have time to put on tefillin, and they have to figure out what to do, and they win the challenge. They get the tefillin on. And then it happens again, it happens again, it happens again. And then eventually, person gets into that clip of putting on tefillin to the extent that it doesn't make a difference what's going on in the world. That tefillin is going on. That's when that has become below the Bechira line. There's not Bechira anymore. It doesn't mean there could never be, but there's no Bechira. You're not choosing to put it on. It's become a part of your life. And that's true with every single thing that we do. When we make it a part of our lives, that's how we eliminate the dilemma. And it's those things that are not yet part of our lives, that's where our dilemmas exist. When you have a moral dilemma and you're not sure, should I do it this way or this way, it's only because it's not defined for you. It's not clear. But if it was clear that this pathway is wrong, has no integrity, and this pathway is right, you don't have a dilemma. You sometimes listen to these moral dilemmas and you say to yourself, what kind of moral dilemma? Just do it that way. I mean, that's the right way. It's not a moral dilemma. It's a moral dilemma when you're morally bankrupt. That's when it's a moral dilemma, because you have no idea what's right and what's wrong. But when you know what's right and what's wrong, there's no dilemma. That's no bechira. You're not choosing. You're living. That's who you are. That's what we try to do to a child. That in those first 5 years, that's why we teach it scripture, because we teach it. It's not for the scholarship of scripture. We no question that we're giving them certain basic fundamentals of learning, but it's not merely for the scholarship of scripture. We're teaching valuable lessons that will help them make these values their values.
So the idea is it's making them so they get this independent. I mean, any child will start getting independence at 5, but we're just trying to focus the independence in the right kind of way.
Independence, never with the thought of taking that independence away from them, but of focusing the independence. I always tell the story that when I had to take my kids to yeshiva, right? I sent in 9th grade, we sent the kids away to yeshiva. Every single one of my children chose the yeshiva that they learned in. Now, I just have to define that choice. I took them to the yeshivas that I would have been happy for them to choose. I didn't take them to, an Orthodox yeshiva, a conservative yeshiva, which I don't know if there is one, but a conservative yeshiva and a reform yeshiva, and then say to them, okay, Tatala, at 12 or 14, make your choice. That's not called making a choice. That's got its own name. But what I did was that I said, this range if they choose this one or this one, doesn't make a difference. Because they'll get something from here. They're all teaching the same message. They're just a little bit different methodology. Let them choose. I let them have their independence, and in the same way it was directed. And that's the first 5 years. The first 5 years, look, it's their entire lives. But the first 5 years is where you're setting down those foundations. If you set yourself a program that I'm going to teach my kid ethics in 5 yees, first 5 years of his life, from 5 to 10, I'm going to teach him ethics. But you have no textbook, you have no, not even a website, the years 5 to 10 by Dr. Ethics, right? You don't have anything. So what are you going to do? And you're going to say, every day I'm going to teach my child another ethical lesson. So you'll get 3, maybe 4, 5. That's it. You're going to run out of steam and run out of things. But when you teach your child scriptures, when you teach your child Chumash, Navi, every single verse is another lesson, is another shaping of their values. That's what the Mishnah is telling us. Okay, I did not. I actually outdid myself, because I not only didn't finish the Mishnah, I didn't even get past the first stage of the Mishnah, which I did expect. I expected to get at least to old age today. But it's aging quickly. But I didn't. But Emir Hashem next week we'll push on, because the first part of the mission is really understandable. You'll see, the 13-year-old, the 20-year-old, the 30, it's beautiful, but it's really understandable. But the real gorgeous part of the Mishnah is 60, 70, 80, 90. The words of the Mishnah are so weird, but what it's presenting is something that is so focusing and energizing that is really amazing. Anyway, we'll get there.
Thank you,
Everybody
Rabbi.
should have.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody wanted to ask a question? Ruth, you wanted to ask something?
No, I'm saying thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, everybody should have a beautiful, wonderful, amazing day and or night. And we'll see you, Mitzvah Hashem, next week.
See you next week. Okay. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's
Okay.
got his next class in 1 minute.
Talk your ways.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, let me stop recording.